Hello and welcome to Mississippi Insight. I'm Byron Brown. Thank you for joining us. We have another full lineup of policy and political news this week, including Mississippi Today's Geoff Pender on Mississippi's medical marijuana mess at the legislature, a fierce Senate debate on a measure to purge voter rolls, and in the capital city of Jackson, rising pressure on police, elected officials, and even some businesses to curb rising violent crime. That's all ahead on this February 14th edition of Mississippi Insight. We begin with Senator Kevin Blackwell's Medical Cannabis Act. This bill to set up a state medical marijuana program was on death's door Thursday, but in late night session on a deadline day, the Senate reconsidered Senate Bill 2765 back, made some changes, and passed it by the required 3/5 majority. It was a wild ride, and Geoff Pender watched it all. Geoff is a senior political reporter at our partner outlet, Mississippi Today. He joined us now by Zoom. And Geoff, you and the senators had a late night Thursday. Let's start off with how and why the Senate voted, and not once, but twice on this bill.
Sure. They had not only a late night, but an early morning. This was the Senate rules at play. The vote barely failed the first go round to get the 3/5. It failed by one vote. They figured they could remedy that, but they had to actually wait until 12:01, just after midnight, so it would technically be a new day, so they could have their do-over. And again, that vote just barely passed, 30-19, got the 3/5 vote, but a lot of controversy, a lot of debate over this issue. It had both bipartisan support, mostly bipartisan support, but certainly bipartisan opposition for very numerous reasons.
It kind of remind viewers of what this bill is designed to do.
Sure, it's a legislative alternative. It was originally designed so the legislature could create a state law medical marijuana program that originally they pitched that it would run in tandem with Initiative 65 should it stand in the courts. Look, at its heart, a lot of this is likely not only so the legislature would have some control over medical marijuana regulations, which they don't with Initiative 65, but probably more pointedly so they would have some taxation over medical marijuana, which they do not have with Initiative 65. They're estimating at this point the first year could net the state in the program they're proposing could net the state around $30 million and could easily jump to a couple of $100 million a year after that. So look, a lot of this is about money. And again, under Initiative 65, the state is pretty much, legislature's pretty much prevented from taxing medical marijuana and certainly prevented from using any of the money for anything else.
How will this work in tandem with 65? Because viewers seem to be confused by having two medical marijuana, laws out there.
Sure. This was initially pitched to run in tandem with Initiative 65, should it stand up in the courts. And look, at its heart, this is most likely an effort by lawmakers to be able to tax medical marijuana. With Initiative 65, they're prohibited from taxing medical marijuana and prohibited from using any revenues from it for anything other than the program. However, in order to get this passed, last night it had to be amended with what they're calling trigger language. So should that language stay in and should this pass, there won't be two programs. This program would kick in if and only when Initiative 65 were to be blocked by the courts. So as it stands now, we would have one or the other. But initially, again, lawmakers were trying to create an alternative that they hoped would be able to operate regardless of the legal status of Initiative 65.
So, Geoff, this would now have to go on to the House, and if it passes the House, then the governor would have to sign it. Is that where we are right now?
Sure. Yes. This heads to the House. it's uncertain what would happen there. Most likely would at the lead, should it pass, there would be changes. And the way it was passed in the Senate, it has to come back to the Senate as well for more debate. So this is something you're going to see play out over at least the next couple of weeks, if not longer, through the session.
Geoff, how important were the tax changes in resurrecting Bill 2765?
The tax changes were important to reduce some of the more Republican members who had some issues with it. That was done in part because there were concerns that the way this measure was proposed would have prevented any small business or perhaps even any local Mississippi people from participating in it, between the tax burden and probably more importantly, the licensing fees. They were dropped from, they would have been $100,000 a year for cultivators. They dropped that down to, I believe, $15,000. Again, that was an effort there were several groups opposed to this, and that was an effort to kind of appease that group.
Geoff, real quickly, before, any indication where the governor stands on these two issues?
The governor, if you'll think back, the governor has, by and large, stayed out of even the Initiative 65 debate, and certainly, I think at this point, he's not really jumped into this debate very much at all. And politically, that's probably a good idea to see how this is going to play out, if at all, because I'll tell you, some of the reaction I've seen today, just kind of social media, anecdotal, but kind of reaction of the masses. This has not been well received by people who supported Initiative 65. And as we saw at the ballot box, a lot of people supported Initiative 65. So this is sort of a political hot potato. And I don't know that the governor wouldn't be well served to sit this one out for a little while and see which way it's going to go with the legislature.
All right, Geoff Pender, Mississippi Today, thank you for joining us. We'll be back with an in-depth look at the Senate debate over voter purges when Mississippi Insight continues. Now to Senate Bill 2588. And we spent some time on this last week. Senator Jeff Tate's bill would allow election officials to purge some voters from the rolls should those voters fail to respond to confirmation notices. We heard passionate comments both for and against the measure, and it was more of the same when the full Senate took up the bill. We'll hear from several senators. First, Jeff Tate, Republican from Meridian, explaining and defending his bill.
Okay, Senate Bill 2588 is a trigger bill. What this bill is going to do is it's going to allow our counties to be able to have another tool in the toolbox to be able to maintain their voter rolls. Lines 18 through 37 are definitions, and the real meat of the bill is going to be between lines 38 and 46, and that's what I'd like to explain now. From lines 38 to 42, it states that the election commissioner shall send each registered elector who has failed to vote at least once in 2 previous elections a confirmation notice. And the period of the 2 years shall also include 2 general federal elections. So if a voter fails to vote in any election between 2 federal general elections, that will trigger the county to send them a confirmation notice. Once that confirmation notice is delivered, on lines 43, it states that the county registrar or county election commission shall remove from SIMS those electors who fail to respond to the notice. And failing to respond to the notice can be explained on lines 24 through 37, which failure to respond means that you fail to respond to the confirmation notice there on line 28, or on 29, you fail to update your registration information. So someone goes 2 federal elections without voting in any election, they don't update their voter registration status. What we have is we have people on the voter rolls that are inactive. that depending on when you start your stopwatch, it's less than 6 years, it's no greater than 8 years, that we haven't heard anything from them. They haven't voted. They've been sent a confirmation card asking for them to respond, and they failed to do so. And what this would do is help clean up our voter rolls.
Back in the 80s, if someone came to vote and the election officials couldn't find their name on the voter rolls, we instructed the officials at the election, let that person vote an affidavit ballot. So no one is ever denied the right to vote. Is that correct?
Never should anybody ever be refused to vote. Every voter that goes into a precinct, regardless if they're registered or not, has the right to vote an affidavit ballot every time.
And when I was an election commissioner, it was our sincere hope that everyone who wished to vote would come and vote. Every qualified elector, everyone who said they were a qualified elector was given that opportunity. So that's why I'm so concerned to hear that there's a fear that there will be voter suppression. And I wanted to make sure that that was still the way it is, that you can vote an affidavit ballot if they can't find your name, and your ballot will be considered when the election officials are certifying the election, correct?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Senate Bill 2588 ran into opposition from Senate Democrats. They included a failed amendment by Senator David Blunt. Lawmakers standing against this bill include Hob Bryan of Amory and here David Jordan of Greenwood.
We have been deprived hundreds of years trying to vote. And here we are now at a point where on the national level, a lot's going on now concerning this. And we're coming with a law. We're coming with a law with no statistics, no of voter fraud. We're just making something. The chairman couldn't even produce any statistics of voter fraud. So he doesn't have the numbers. Now here we are making a law to remove people from the road. This doesn't make any sense. I know people can't read and write, got judgment more clever. This doesn't make sense that we do this. And to no avail, because actually we got a new administration. And we don't want to be hung up on a national level on something we do here that we don't have to do. But voter fraud is no major problem in Mississippi. I think you get something like 0.00004. But we use these to deprive people of color from using their ballot. That's wrong. That's not right. So we don't need this bill.
There are many people who vote only in presidential election years. Look at the statistics. Millions of people across the country who only show up to vote in presidential election years. They get to do that. It's okay. Under this bill, if one of those voters, and they exist in the state of Mississippi, tens of thousands, one of those voters who only votes in presidential election years simply skips the presidential election year one time. Didn't like the candidates, just didn't get there, didn't feel good that day, sick, out of town, whatever. That individual then shows up in the next presidential election to vote, and that individual will not be able to cast a vote that will count. It's all well and good to say the individual can cast an affidavit ballot. I can go down here somewhere in Hinds County and cast an affidavit ballot, but it won't be counted. And the rather glib response to many questions about this is, oh, you can cast an affidavit ballot. The whole purpose of this is to remove you from the rolls and take away from you your right to vote, to make it illegal for you to vote, to keep you from being able to vote. That is the heart and soul of this piece of legislation. For tens of thousands of people in Mississippi, eligible voters who haven't done a thing in the world except choose not to vote in every single election and didn't get a postcard or letter or whatever the thing is, they are going to be denied their right to vote by the tens of thousands, and you know it. You know for certain that will happen.
By a vote of 36 ayes, 16 noes, the bill is passed. Senator Simmons, you have a question? Or you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to hold that item on a motion to reconsider.
Please join the chairman.
Senate Bill 2588. It's not clear when the House may take up the measure. We'll be back with a look at Jackson's violent crime woes when Mississippi Insight continues. Welcome back to Mississippi's capital city now. With a string of homicides and violent crime still under investigation, police face loud calls by city leaders and community members for action. They are demanding a concrete plan to deal with the crime. Council members and police officials met this week to talk about that and the falling morale in the department. One of the strategies policymakers are considering is a clampdown on some neighborhoods' convenience stores. 12 News' Alex Love will look at that. But first, our Kayla Thompson has more from the Law Enforcement Ad Hoc Committee.
Jackson Police and the City Council met Tuesday morning to discuss solving crime in Jackson and what the police department is doing to stop the bleeding.
Our bottom line goal is to address violent crime in the city of Jackson.
Police morale was also a topic of discussion, and Chief Davis says one of the biggest morale killers is having to field release criminals because of the lack of jail space.
People feel that if I'm not going to jail, they may get more aggressive in doing misdemeanor crimes. So we have many things that play a role in the violent crime,
including the need for more officers. JPD has budgeted 352 officers, and right now they are 51 short. Chief Davis says those jobs will be filled with new recruits.
There'll be boots on the ground, and the ones that we have right now, experienced officers, they'll move up into investigation.
More investigators are needed. Of the 129 homicides last year, 40 remain unsolved. And then there's the issue of gangs, which the chief acknowledged.
Do we have a gang problem in the city of Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Jackson Police have 6 officers designated to a gang unit and wouldn't give further details about the operation to not reveal the plan. One plan that was discussed is what to do about convenience stores as a target for violent crime.
Thompson store give us special privilege to break our laws that causing a lot of problems in our communities.
Council members and JPD discussed putting a curfew on convenience stores and connecting video cameras to the real-time command center, or even increasing police presence at those stores. I spoke to community members off camera who said that would make them feel more comfortable.
Security at most of the gas stations, especially in the bad parts of town, even if it was a on-duty police officer, that'd be better for me and make me feel safer.
Police say the real-time command center is working, and they are working to get more cameras around the city and equip officers with the resources they need to be more efficient.
Following another deadly weekend in Jackson with 2 lives taken at the Josco gas station at the Woodrow Wilson MLK intersection, Councilman Stokes has had enough.
If you open 24 hours as a convenience store, you must have security. That's the first thing. As for Jazz, go across the street, declare it as a nuisance, and let's close it down.
We love you, buddy.
On Tuesday night, family and close friends of Christopher Lee, known as Buddy, happened to be at the Josco holding a balloon release in his honor. They agree these policies should be in place.
When you see security, when you coming to do wrong, you're going to go the other way. You know, it'll prevent a whole lot of it. You know, could have very well stopped it. But the stores don't want to pay for it.
The way the item is written to work, the city council would order every gas station and corner store to close after dark if they refuse to hire security, but also strictly vet who qualifies.
We want to make sure that the legal department make sure we have a legitimate security companies. We don't want someone going hiring a crackhead and saying this is our security guard and act like you're gonna give them a gun.
Since making it through committee, the vote is scheduled for next Tuesday at the usual city council meeting. Right now, Jackson is on pace to total 156 homicides in 2021.
I have worked at stores before and they came in to rob me, while I was working.
Anything with a history of crime and violence, you can go into a court of law, show it as a nuisance, and have it closed.
Along with these new policies, Councilman Stokes also wants money left over from previous years in the city budgets allocated to moving Hinds County deputies to patrol Jackson streets.
That's Alex Love, preceded by Kayla Thompson for 12 News. We'll be right back. Thanks to Kayla Thompson, Alex Love, Mississippi Today's Geoff Pender for joining us this week. We'll be back next weekend with more of the political and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown. For all of us here at 12 News, make it a great weekend.